When 16-year-old Alina stepped onto the stage of Crescent High School, the bright white spotlight washed over her trembling hands as the auditorium fell into quiet anticipation, and though the audience saw only a confident top student preparing to deliver a speech at the annual Excellence Awards ceremony, inside her chest a storm raged: fear, love, shame, and a truth she had carried for years, a truth she was finally ready to reveal. Rows of polished trophies glimmered behind her, banners draped across the walls celebrating the school's future leaders, and students in crisp outfits whispered excitedly, yet Alina's eyes searched for only one person in the entire hall: her father. He sat alone near the back where the lights didn't fully reach, wearing the same faded navy janitor uniform he had worn for 17 years, the one with patches he stitched by hand because he could never afford new ones. His calloused hands were folded awkwardly in his lap, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller in a room full of people who rarely noticed him. To most, he was invisible, just the janitor who cleaned their hallways, emptied their bins, fixed their broken desks, and stayed late after every event. But to her, he was everything: father, mother, protector, teacher, and the silent strength behind every one of her achievements. She remembered mornings when he woke before dawn to cook for her before rushing to school to mop floors, nights when he fell asleep in his chair waiting for her to return from studies, winters when he pretended he wasn't cold so he could give her his own jacket, and all the sacrifices he made so she could stand here today. But Alina also remembered the whispers, the ones that stung, the ones she pretended not to hear. Her dad is the janitor. No wonder she doesn't talk much. Poor kid. Each word had cut like glass, and each time she had swallowed the pain, too afraid of standing out, too ashamed to admit that the man everyone belittled was the very reason she rose higher every year. But today was different. Today she was being awarded the Best Student Achievement Trophy, the highest honor the school offered, and she had refused to let the school principal hand her a pre-written, polished speech. She had written her own, one that would shatter the silence of years. Her heart hammered as the auditorium lights dimmed, leaving only the spotlight on her. She stepped to the microphone, throat dry, but her voice, though soft, carried the weight of 17 years. Before I accept this award, she began, I want to tell you a story, about a man most of you have seen, but none of you really know. A visible shift rippled through the crowd, students leaned forward, teachers exchanged curious glances, the principal froze mid-smile. She continued, for years, I hid something. I was embarrassed, not because of anything I did, but because of what others might think. She inhaled sharply, eyes glistening. The man I'm talking about is my father. A murmur of surprise spread through the hall. Her father, sitting in the back row, stiffened, his eyes widening as if afraid she was revealing something that would humiliate him. But then she lifted her hand and pointed directly at him, the spotlight shifting slightly, illuminating him for the first time. Gasps echoed, some shocked, some confused, some ashamed. Tears gathered in his eyes instantly, his breath catching in his throat. Alina's voice trembled but remained steady. Yes, my father is the janitor who cleans this school. The hall went utterly still. No whispers now, just stunned silence. For years, I let the world make me feel ashamed of that, she continued, her voice breaking. I heard people laugh at his uniform, mock his job, ignore his presence. And I said nothing. I stayed silent because I was a coward. The audience's eyes shifted toward the father, an ordinary man suddenly placed under extraordinary light. But let me tell you who he really is, Alina said, strength rising in her tone. He is the man who wakes up at 4 a.m. so I never start my day alone. He is the man who worked double shifts when I needed books. The man who skipped meals so I never had to. The man who cleaned these floors with pride so I could walk on them with dignity. The man who gave me everything, even when he had nothing. A tear rolled down her father's cheek, glimmering under the spotlight. Students began lowering their heads, some looked ashamed, some looked moved, and some wiped tears quietly. Alina continued, I stand here today as the top student not because I'm smart, but because I'm the daughter of the hardest working man in this school. The principal's mouth fell open. A few teachers looked down in guilt. So today, Alina said, lifting the trophy with her trembling hand, I dedicate this award to my father, the man people see as a janitor, but whom I call a hero. Her voice echoed through the hall like thunder. And then something unexpected happened. One by one, people began to stand, students first, then teachers, then even the principal, rising in a wave of respect. A standing ovation, loud, overwhelming, echoing off the walls. The father covered his mouth with his hand, shoulders shaking as he cried silently. He had spent years blending into the background, unnoticed, unappreciated, unseen. But today, because of his daughter's courage, the entire auditorium finally saw him. Alina walked down the stage, each step slow, emotional, powerful. When she reached him, he stood shakily, and she threw her arms around him in a tight embrace. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his chest. "I should have been proud of you long ago." He kissed the top of her head, tears falling into her hair. "I've always been proud of you," he whispered. "More than anything." Cameras flashed, students cried, teachers clapped, and in that moment, the janitor, who had always walked in shadows, stood in the brightest light of his life. And he glowed. For the first time in 17 years, he didn't feel small. He felt seen, valued, respected. And it was his daughter, his brave, brilliant, fierce daughter, who had given him that honor. That night, the story spread across the school, then across the town, and by morning across the internet. People didn't talk about the top student. They talked about the janitor father who raised her. They talked about love, sacrifice, dignity, and the courage of a daughter who broke her silence. And from that day forward, no one ever looked at him the same way again.